Welcome to the WPL Book Drop Podcast. I am your host, Becky Miller, Marketing and Circulation Library Assistant, cat lover, nonfiction enthusiast, and cozy blanket collector. Joining us today is Endya Johnson, Technical Systems Assistant at the Waterloo Public Library. Her favorite time of year is a warm fall day, which we're having today. She considers herself a pizza connoisseur, and she really enjoys audiobooks. There's just something great about hearing a voice speak those words right off the page. Welcome, Endya.
Thank you, Becky. Appreciate it.
And also joining us today is Lindsay Buehler. She is the Arts and Cultural Coordinator at Hawkeye Community College. She is an artist, but she prefers to refer to herself as an artivist. Lindsay and her colleague Jennifer Bates currently have an installation called The Great Firewall on display at the University of Kentucky. Lindsay is a librarian who has a lot of cardigans, but no cats. Instead, she has one golden doodle named Finn. Welcome, Lindsay.
Thanks.
All right, let's start off by letting our listeners know that this episode is going to be all about Banned Books Week, which happens each year in September. This year, Banned Books Week is September 26th through October 2nd. So let's begin with explaining what Banned Books Week is for our listeners that don't know. Endya, what can you tell us about Banned Books Week?
Sure, it's an annual event that celebrates the freedom to read. That gives people to acknowledge that, the option to read. We sometimes sometimes we think that we can just read anything, from the time you're young to the time you're old, but some books do get banned, some get challenged in schools and libraries, and so the week is just kind of acknowledge that there's a freedom out there to read just about anything, and so we just like to acknowledge that.
Sure, it's very important, because you said about getting banned and challenged. What does that mean? What is happening with those books? So
many times there might be a school that feels like a book might be uncomfortable for their child to read, and so they will challenge that book. Many times, even here in Waterloo School, we did have a book that was challenged a few years ago. Endya in the Cupboard, I believe, was one book that did get challenged in the schools, and it was in the paper and everything. But, it's usually a parent or someone from the community who feels that this book should not be read and it's not appropriate for certain children to have. So, yeah, it happens quite a bit, and it's always one that seems to be added almost every year. A lot of the classics were challenged. Huck Finn was one. Think of another one. Color Purple. I mean, there's just a whole list of books for various reasons, and we're going to have our own that we're going to talk about. But it's quite surprising when you look at the list of books and why they were challenged, and they vary. It could be sexual, it could be graphics, it could be one that was kind of interesting was a community position as far as their job, and they thought they were being challenged in the book, and they didn't like how they were being represented, and so they were challenged by the school, like, this is our industry, don't talk bad about it, so there's a lot of various reasons why people challenge books or ban books, but ultimately, especially in the library situation, we want everybody to be able to have the option to read, period. You just want people to be able to read, so it's very interesting to look at the list. Right. Sometimes some of the titles can be what some would be considering maybe inappropriate or uncomfortable, but sometimes you need to be exposed to different ideas so that you can learn empathy or engage in critical thinking and have discussions about those books. 100%. So what is WPL doing for Banned Books Week? This year we are going to have a display both in the adult area and the youth area, displaying, kind of uncovering banned books in the sense of, we're going to have a display with the quotes, and people can kind of guess what books they are, and they can discover maybe a book they may not have known that they were banned or challenged, and so kind of like a hide and seek situation, but we will have a display out for both the youth area and adult area. Very good. Lindsay, you used to work at the Waterloo Public Library as a library assistant.
Yeah.
Welcome back.
Thank you.
You now work at Hawkeye Community College as the Arts and Cultural Coordinator Before I ask you about Banned Books Week, can you tell us a little bit about what you do at Hawkeye?
Yeah, absolutely. As you said, I'm the Arts and Culture Coordinator at Hawkeye Community College. I'm tasked with building a campus culture and growing the arts at Hawkeye. There are three main threads to arts and culture. I oversee the Artist Series, which is a small performing arts series. I also oversee the Hawkeye Art Gallery and main campus exhibition spaces, as well as care for the college's permanent art collection. And lastly, I develop co-curricular arts and culture programming, so events that tie into the curriculum and support institutional learning outcomes, such as artist talks, speakers, workshops, panel discussions, films, things along those lines. One of my favorite co-curricular roles is being part of the Hawkeye Reads team, which is our campus common read program.
All right. So it seems like you've always got different kinds of art coming in. Didn't you recently just get something brought in from, I think it was overseas somewhere?
Yeah, we have a work on display. It just opened. It's called Brotherland, War in the Ukraine, and it's a series by photojournalist Brendan Hoffman. He documented the Civil War in Ukraine, and it was at the Blandon Art Museum in Fort Dodge before coming to Waterloo. But originally, it's made its way over from Ukraine to Waterloo.
Fantastic. And where can someone go and see that?
Yeah, that's on our main campus at Hawkeye Community College in Black Hawk Hall, and it's in the Black Hawk corridor.
Okay. So we have you on the program today to talk about Banned Books Week. So what is Hawkeye doing for Banned Books Week?
So Hawkeye Reads celebrates banned books every year with a public reading in our campus courtyard. And this event will be on Wednesday, September 29th at noon. We gather each year and ask participants to either read aloud from their favorite banned book or speak to why the book resonates with them. It's a fun act of subversion to hold a microphone and read quote-unquote controversial words from books like the Lorax and listen to them echo across the campus.
Very cool. So why is Banned Books Week important to you?
Banned Books Week is important because it calls attention to the fact that this is a practice which, at its core, is censorship and restricting access to information. I think it was Thomas Jefferson that first expressed that a well-informed citizenry is the cornerstone of a democracy, and the two things cannot coexist. You can't have censorship and be inhibiting access to information and still have that well-informed citizenry. They run up against each other. And so I believe that that's why Banned Books Week is so important, because it shines the light on the fact that although these are small decisions, we might find a book and have issue with the content or the words in them. It's kind of a smaller way of causing a bigger problem in our society when we ban them.
Right, it's kind of a slippery slope, where does
Very
it
much
end
so.
if you
Yes.
do that?
Yeah.
So let's take some time before we wrap up to talk about our banned books that we brought, and I'll start.
Sure.
I brought The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas. This book is about a 16-year-old named Star, and she is kind of going between two different worlds. She's got her prep school that she's going to, and then she's got her neighborhood that she lives in and the different struggles that she deals with there. So going between these worlds, and then she goes to a party and she sees an old friend from the neighborhood, and they get to chatting, but then there is violence that occurs and they leave very quickly. On their way away from the party, they're driving, and they get pulled over by a police officer and confronted, and her friend gets shot by the police officer, and he's unarmed. So this character has a lot to deal with, and obviously this goes along with the national conversation on police brutality. So it's a really good book. One of the reasons that it's been challenged is because there is profanity in it. This is a teen fiction item, so it's not like teens have never heard bad words or even used them, but there's a lot of profanity in the book, and then also some have said that it's an anti-police message. However, I do think it's an important read because it speaks to the experience of that character, and it's an exposure where you might have heard of the concept of windows and mirrors,
Yep.
where you can see yourself reflected in the literature, or you can learn someone else's perspective. So it's an important read for that reason. It's unfortunate that it was challenged, but I think that it's worthy of attention and discussion. So even if you are uncomfortable with it, you could read it and then discuss it, you know, in your family.
Do you know if it's only challenge in schools?
I think it was mainly a challenge in schools, like in a high school library. Some parents are uncomfortable with it; they don't like the message. But again, we are exposed to a lot of things, and whether that's in, you know, your school library or out in the world, these discussions and ideas are important, and something that parents need to have anyway. So I support this book, and I hope more people will read it.
I do as well. That was actually our Hawkeye Reads book prior to COVID.
Awesome.
Yeah.
The discussion that came out of there must have been really enlightening, I imagine.
It was. It was tough at times to address some of the topics, but I think it was an important discussion to have, especially with students that are that age, young adults, and confronting issues like this out in society. So I think it was one of my favorite books that we did for Hawkeye Reads.
Yeah, good.
So, Lindsay, what book did you bring us today?
So I brought The Lorax by Dr. Seuss. This has been one of my favorite books since I was a very little kid. The Lorax is described to be a cautionary tale of human destruction in the natural environment in pursuit of wealth. So the book tells the story of a character called the Onceler who cuts down the trees to make a garment called a thneed. The Lorax protests on the behalf of the trees and the barbaloots who depend on them to survive. And eventually, when the trees have been cut down and the air and the water supply have been polluted, the Onceler packs his things and he moves on in pursuit of new resources to consume. It's been challenged because it's quote-unquote controversial environmentalist message. In particular, the California forestry industry took issue with it in the 1980s. They believe it was criticism of the logging industry, and it very well could be. It involves quotes that say, grow a forest and protect it from axes that hack. So Seuss was pretty clear about his feelings on that. And it closes with my favorite quote by the Lorax, his parting words: unless someone cares a whole awful lot, nothing is going to get better. It's not.
Can I ask what age you were when you found out that was banned?
Oh man, I think I was an adult when I first started digging into Banned Books Week, and I was like, how did this land on the list?
Right.
And it had been one of my favorite books, and since I was very little. So I hadn't really thought of it from that perspective until I started really learning about banned books and trying to figure out why this was included.
That was one, when we did banned books, when we were investigating a year ago, that was one that surprised a lot of people. Like, why is that banned?
Right.
And of all things. But I mean, I totally get it now. Like, behind the story, like, oh, okay, the background, I get it now.
Yeah.
So.
It's something you don't think of as controversial, but somebody else does.
Definitely. And
Right, it's all like up for interpretation, and it's about who's offended and who's not, and yeah. Endya, what book did you bring?
This was actually the one that I was surprised that I'm going through the list of banned books this year. You know, I've kind of done this a couple of years, and so I don't know why I had missed this one, but it's Where's Waldo? It's actually the very first one, and I was like, why in the world? There's no words in this. Like, what could possibly be the reason why you would challenge this book? So his first copy of Where's Waldo, Martin Hanford did have these great illustrations of Where's Waldo, and in one of the pics of where you're trying to search for Waldo, and all these pics of pictures in here, there's a young lady sunbathing on the beach. And so that was challenged at one of the schools, because you can see the ones, actually she's laying forward, but you can see a bit of nudity in it. And so it's like circle. I mean, you can't really see it until someone actually points it out to you. So I was actually quite surprised that Where's Waldo was one that was challenged in a school, but they were searching high and low. I mean, I'm telling you, I was really quite surprised. But,
Yeah, wow, that's really something.
Yeah.
Well, I'm so glad that both of you were able to join us today on the Book Drop podcast. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Absolutely.
Thank you for noting how important this is for people to be able to acknowledge that banned book is real. But freedom to read is very important. So thank
That's
you.
right. So we challenge each of you that are listening to pick up a banned book during Banned Books Week. And if you like today's episode, be sure to leave us a rating and subscribe. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.